Thank you, Presiding Officer. I refer to my entry in the Register of Members' Interests to ask the Scottish Government, in light of recent reports, whether it will provide further information regarding existing Scotrail contracts with Abellio.
Minister Jenny Gilruth.
As part of the transition to a publicly owned railway, it was necessary for Transport Scotland to undertake a review of all existing contracts. It was identified that 4 existing Abellio contracts would be required to continue with Scotrail Trains Limited from the 1st of April this year to ensure consistency of service for passengers and to facilitate a smooth transition. Contracts retained include Abellio Shared Services Centre for customer service calls and correspondence, payroll services and payment processing facilities, Abellio Rail Replacement for the provision of planned and unplanned replacement bus and taxi services, Advanced Ventures for management of station tenancy and advertising management, and the bus link between Central and Glasgow Queen Street stations.
Katy Clark.
The information in the media came from a Freedom of Information request. Could the Cabinet Secretary inform the Parliament how much money is involved in these contracts?
Minister.
I'm afraid I cannot disclose the financials involved in these contracts because they are commercially sensitive. However, I think she is right that public ownership of Scotland's railways needs to mean exactly that. And I think her question requires a level of contextualisation, Presiding Officer, to that end. First of all, it was prudent to carry over a limited number of contracts, whether delivered by Abellio or other suppliers, to maintain Scotrail services from day one of public ownership and to give that continuity of service for passengers and for staff alike. But it's also pretty common practice right across the UK in relation to the UK and Welsh governments in relation to practices that have been undertaken in the past. And secondly, there are only 4 Abellio contracts from the almost 200 suppliers that remain in place, and 3 of those have a 1-year break clause point, which will allow for competitive alternatives to be looked at. So the approach taken has been a pragmatic one, but this is particularly pertinent, I think, when we consider the 4th contract, crucially, which secures, of course, jobs at the Scotrail Services Centre in Glasgow.
Katy Clark.
Thank you, and I'm grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. And perhaps she could reconsider some of the issues round about confidentiality and write to me in detail on that, given that this is fair payers and taxpayers' money that we are talking about. I hope she does agree with me that every penny of the money that we put into our railways should be put into the system and not leak out into the public sector. Could she outline whether there are any rail replacement services being provided by Abellio, given that we know that there are contracts relating to that, but there are currently a lack of rail replacement services? And could she give a commitment to look at that contract and the others with Abellio to bring them back in-house as soon as possible, as she's indicated, and give a timescale in relation to that?
Minister.
I thank the member for her supplementary question. She covers a number of points. So, first of all, I just want to make clear that none of these contracts are a permanent feature of public ownership. And indeed, to that end, I have asked my officials at Transport Scotland to continuously review whether or not they are delivering best value for money. I think the point she made at the start of her question in relation to the benefit to leaking out in terms of the finances here, I am sympathetic to the principle. However, we do need to consider that continuity aspect, which on the 1st of April was essential. There was a level of anxiety, of course, for staff and passengers alike on the 1st of April, so there was, I think at that time, there needed to be a level of continuity going forward. And the contracts themselves were reviewed at the point in which Scotrail came into public ownership on April the 1st itself. But more broadly on her ask as we move forward with public ownership, as she knows, I want our trade union partners to have a vested stake, as do I wish passengers and staff alike, in Scotland's railways and what that vision will look like. And that's why we've committed to a national conversation on rail. She asked a question around about rail replacement buses, which does link to one of the contracts. And as she may be aware, Scotrail has confirmed that securing rail replacement transport at this time is significantly more challenging than it has been in the past. Now, that relates, of course, to a decrease in the number of available bus and taxi drivers, coinciding with another number of challenges, not least in terms of the challenges the bus industry faces in relation to the COVID pandemic, but also some of the challenges there have been compounded by the wider impacts of Brexit. So I'm happy to take her question more generally in relation to bus replacement to Scotrail. She will understand that over the past couple of weeks I've been making these representations myself. There is a challenge here for Scotrail. I recognise that, but I'm happy to write to the member with more detail on the timescales associated with any delivery of further bus replacement provision.